How a challenge turned me into a perfect woman. My name is Alex and I'm 21 years old. On the outside, I fit the mold of a typical guy, athletic, competitive, and a little cocky. I played sports in high school and made sure to keep up appearances as someone who didn't rock the boat. People knew me as a guy who could never be anything other than masculine, someone who never took a risk, never strayed from the norm. But then something happened. Something that would flip my world upside down and change everything I thought I knew about myself. It started with a challenge from my friend Jake. He's always been the one pushing boundaries, daring me to do things I wouldn't usually do. One night, while hanging out in the dorm, he casually threw out a dare, something I never saw coming. I bet you can't spend a whole week dressed as a woman. I'm talking full-on transformation. No half measures, no turning back. I remember laughing at first, thinking it was just one of Jake's typical jokes. The idea of me, Alex, the football player, the guy who worked out religiously, dressed as a woman was absurd. How could I even consider such a thing? But then, as the challenge settled in my mind, something shifted. It wasn't just about the dare anymore. It was about proving something to myself. I didn't want to back out, to be the guy who chickened out on a challenge, even if it seemed ridiculous. There was a strange pull, an unspoken curiosity growing inside me. What would it feel like to completely let go of the identity I had spent my whole life cultivating? I didn't know then that this one challenge would begin a journey I never could have anticipated. And maybe, just maybe, it would give me the chance to uncover parts of myself I'd buried for years. I couldn't stop thinking about the challenge. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the idea kept looping in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more intrigued I became. There was something tantalizing about the thought of completely stepping out of my comfort zone. But there was also fear, a deep, gnawing fear that I couldn't shake. How could I possibly pull it off? I had never done anything like this before. Sure, I joked around with costumes for Halloween or had put on a wig for fun with some friends, but this was different. This wasn't about pretending for a few hours. This was about completely transforming myself, my look, my behavior, everything. What if I embarrassed myself? What if people laughed at me? What if I couldn't even pull it off convincingly? These thoughts were constantly swirling in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. But then again I thought, what if it didn't have to be embarrassing? What if I could actually do this? The idea of fully transforming intrigued me more than I cared to admit. It wasn't just the thrill of the bed anymore. There was something about it that felt liberating, almost like an escape from the expectations placed on me as a guy. What if, for just a week, I could wear clothes that weren't just t-shirts and jeans? What if I could express a different side of myself? I turned to my roommate Sean for advice, though I knew he'd probably laugh. "Dude, what do you think?" I asked, feeling a bit awkward. Jake challenged me to dress as a girl for a week. Should I do it? Sean blinked a few times, trying to process the question. What, like, full-on drag queen style? Not exactly, I muttered, but yeah. Dresses, makeup, all of it. Like a woman. Man, if you're going to do it, you better go all in. No half-ass stuff. Just do it right. And I'll warn you, if you do, there's no going back. He gave me a grin, but his words made me stop in my tracks. He was right. There was no turning back if I did this. Suddenly, I was filled with a sense of dread. But even as that fear set in, there was something else, something powerful bubbling underneath. Could I really go through with this? And if I did, would it be just a one-time thing? Or would it change me forever? I spent the next few days in a constant state of internal conflict. Every time I thought about the challenge, the fear would return. But there was also a strange curiosity, a desire to know what it would feel like. So I began researching. I watched countless YouTube tutorials on makeup, fashion, and how to pull off a convincing feminine look. I spent hours picking out outfits online, trying to figure out what would work for me. It was like preparing for a test I wasn't sure I was ready for. Jake would text me occasionally, reminding me of the challenge. He knew I was starting to waver, and he wasn't about to let me back out. "You still in?" he asked one evening. "Or are you just going to be the chicken who chickened out?" I hated the idea of backing down, but the closer it got to the day I'd have to start, the more I second-guessed myself. How would I feel when I looked in the mirror for the first time, dressed as a woman? How would I feel when people saw me in public? I decided to talk to Emma. She was my best friend, and I trusted her more than anyone. When I told her about the challenge, she didn't laugh. Instead, she looked thoughtful, like she was considering it seriously. Alex, you do realize this is a big deal, right? You can't just mess around with this. Are you doing it because you want to, or are you just doing it because of the bet? I hesitated, not knowing how to answer. I don't know. Maybe both. But I just can't get it out of my head. I keep thinking about it. What if it's not just about the bet? Emma looked at me for a long time, then gave me a small smile. If you're doing this, you need to own it. Commit to it. Don't just wear the clothes. Be her. If you do this right, you might learn something about yourself. Her words stuck with me. Could I really commit to this? Could I let go of everything I thought I knew about myself? It wasn't just about the clothes. It was about who I was, or rather, who I could be. As the week drew closer, I found myself obsessing over the details. I would go to the store and buy dresses, heels, makeup, all the things I had never even considered wearing. Each item felt like a step further into the unknown. The more I tried things on, the more I began to question who I was supposed to be. The night before the challenge, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself in my usual clothes. The old Alex, the guy I knew so well. Was I really ready to let go of this person, even for a week? I woke up the next morning with a sense of determination. There was no more thinking, no more doubting. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. I grabbed the dress I had chosen, a simple black one that looked elegant but wasn't too flashy, and began the transformation. My hands were shaking as I applied the foundation and concealer, trying my best to follow the YouTube tutorials I had watched 1,000 times. It felt awkward at first, the makeup heavy on my skin. But the more I worked, the more it started to feel right. The heels were next. I slipped them on, feeling my posture shift. It was strange, but there was an odd sense of power in the way I stood. I wasn't just Alex anymore. Not entirely. I was becoming something else. I pulled the wig on, the long, silky hair falling around my shoulders. The first time I looked at myself in the mirror, I couldn't believe what I saw. The person staring back at me wasn't just a guy in drag. It was her. It was the person I never allowed myself to be. I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection. For a moment, I couldn't even recognize myself. Was this what I had been missing all along? The freedom to express myself without the constraints of who I thought I was supposed to be? I took a deep breath. There was no going back now. This was happening. The first few hours were nerve-wracking. I could feel my heart pounding as I stepped outside. The air was cool, and the dress fluttered lightly around my legs. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked, every step unfamiliar. At first, it felt like I was playing a role. But slowly I began to relax into it. With each passing minute, I felt more and more like I was no longer pretending to be a woman. I was just me. As I walked down the street, I could feel people's eyes on me. Some were curious, others surprised, but no one seemed judgmental. It was like I had stepped into a new world, one where I wasn't just Alex, the guy who had always played it safe. I was someone else entirely. I spent the day in a daze, experiencing the world through a new lens. I went into a cafe for the first time, ordering a coffee without any of the usual hesitation I had as a guy. People smiled at me, held doors open for me, treated me with a kindness I hadn't expected. Later that day, I ran into Jake. He was stunned when he saw me. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he admitted. I smiled, feeling proud of myself. I didn't think I would either. That was when I realized something. This wasn't just about winning the bet anymore. This was about understanding who I truly was, underneath everything I had built. It wasn't just the clothes or the makeup that had changed me. It was the way I saw myself, and the way others saw me. By the end of the week, I was a different person. Not in the way I had expected, but in a way that was far more profound. Dressing as a woman had opened my eyes to parts of myself I hadn't realized were there. It wasn't just about looking feminine. It was about embracing a different side of me, one I had kept hidden for years. When the week was up, I didn't want to go back to being the old Alex. I had found something deeper within me, something I couldn't ignore. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew this. I was no longer just Alex, the guy who followed the rules. I was someone who could express myself freely, without shame or fear. Jake congratulated me on completing the challenge, but I wasn't sure if the challenge was really over. I had opened a door to a new part of myself, and I wasn't ready to close it just yet. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new.